Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Ready now to begin, by God's permission, day 3 of our study of Surah al-Baqarah, chapter 2. I believe last time we got as far as verse 7. So I'll start with a brief recap, by God's permission. We've discussed how, as an overview, the surah covers the topic of guidance and kind of defines what God's guidance is after having prayed for it in the previous surah. How it defines God's guidance as the religion of Abraham, the religion of submission, of exclusive devotion, exclusive worship of God, and then contrasted against basically a large portion focusing on the children of Israel, for instance, in the first half of the surah, and how God has revealed effectively the same religion to them, and how when they deviated off of this message. In the initial portions of the surah, first 7 verses, we covered how God has defined basically that this is the book in which there is no doubt, a guidance for the wary. And so the book is itself guidance. Alaikum salam, welcome brothers and sisters. The book is guidance, and the verses that define who the guidance basically benefits, who can be guided by the book, which is those of taqwa, muttaqin, those who have certain qualities which the book goes through, who stand the prayer, spend of what we've provided them, who believe in the unseen first, who believe in what was sent down to you and what was sent down before you, and in the hereafter they are certain. And then we had just a couple verses, last 2 verses we covered on basically who the book does not guide. Indeed, those who denied it is the same upon them if you warn them or you did not warn them, they do not believe. So those who deny the book and deny guidance, they block themselves from guidance effectively. Alaikum salam. Is the audio okay? Coming in clear to others? Okay, I think it might be you, Brother Saad, then, because it seems good to others. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, well, some chaos in the background. Yeah, and by the way, I'll post the StreamYard link in the chat. Thanks, Sister Meow, for the reminder. So anyone can join the stage as well. So today we're picking up with this discussion on verse 9. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون في قلوبهم. Oh, sorry, I missed the verse. ومن الناس من يقول آمن بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون. Oh man. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون. Oof. Oh, here is the criminal who is causing all this chaos. But anyway, she actually, but yeah, she's now distracted by some strings, so hopefully that'll take a while. So I read, kind of lost my place. So I read 8, 9, 10. 8, 9, 10, I guess. I read in Arabic, now in English. In English. And of the people is he who says we believed in God and in the last day, and not are they believers. Yeah, back. They deceive God and those who believed, and not do they deceive except themselves, and not do they perceive. In their hearts is sickness, so increase them God in sickness, and for them is a painful torment for what they were belying. So I'll give a second to reflect. So you could say within this discussion of starting with the book as a guidance for the wary, then God gives basically the example of those who are the party which it guides, those who are wary, and describes them in terms of their attributes: belief in the unseen, establishment of prayer, spending of what we provided, etc. Then God discusses in 2 brief verses those who it doesn't guide, who basically deny, therefore they pretty much like rebuff and reject the guidance, thus are not guided due to their own rejection. And finally we get to this group which God treats in the most amount of verses, and it actually does not define them explicitly. It's obviously hypocrites here, but God does not actually use the word per se. He defines them in verse 8 as those who say we believed in God and the last day, and they're not believers. But this is definitionally what hypocrisy is, religious hypocrisy anyway, which is related to just general hypocrisy. General hypocrisy is defined pretty much universally as saying something and doing something else, a disconnect between what you say and what you do. So when applied to the religion, it has the same core function. You say you believe in God at the last day, but you do not do that. Or practically that's not the case. It's sufficient. And actually, it's interesting how God deals at most length in this surah, at least in the introduction, with this group, because also if you think about it, this group is the most expansive, arguably, amongst humanity, because the majority of people probably would claim to believe in God and at the last day. And I would question as to whether that's genuine. Therefore, a lot of people today from all sorts of backgrounds, identifying as all sorts of religions, would fit this characteristic.
There is no transition, sorry, Salam brothers artists as well. There's no transition from kafirs to munafiqs. That basically is subtle indication that hypocrites are disbelievers. Literally, they say they believe, but they don't believe. But there's also an implication that they are not going to be guided, even though they claim to use the book as well, to be using the book.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with you 100%. They're an interesting case study because they don't outright reject the book, as in to say, I mean, necessarily. They don't completely reject the idea of God's guidance, but they still don't receive it on account of their sort of, how to put it, replacement of faith with just posturing and external
But isn't there another verse that says that it doesn't reach their hearts?
doesn't reach their hearts. I don't quite remember.
Let me try to look it up then. Just wonder if that's a verse or if I'm being biased. That's a common saying as well.
So which verse are you guys on?
We are discussing 8 through 10. Walaikum salam. So meanwhile, I think there are several indicators of lack of guidance or astrayness, keeping with that theme of guidance. Alaikum salam, welcome sister. So with astrayness, they literally, their position of hypocrisy is like, we're not going to believe, but we'll say that we believe, and as if that will be sufficient for anything. So by this sort of portraying themselves as believers, whether or not they are fully aware of it, they seek to deceive God and those who believed. Like they're looking for a political advantage, for instance, with the believers to fall in favor with the believers if the believers are dominant in any context, such as the Medinan context of the original revelation. So they basically want to deceive God as if God would accept them just based upon identifying amongst the believers, or as if the believers will accept them if they act as if they're one of them. And this idea of deceiving God is like preposterous from its inception, because if there's one entity you cannot deceive, that would be God exactly. So it's evidence of like preposterous misguidance.
And you're right, there's actually not a verse, but that saying that the faith cannot reach or cannot enter their hearts is probably a paraphrase from that their hearts are sealed in 63:3, and
Actually, you
36.
might be thinking of the one that goes, يا أيها النبي لا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر من الذين قالوا آمنا بأفواههم ولم تؤمن قلوبهم.
Right, and something similar about Bedouins as well. Ah, that is the one. Wait. Yes, that is the one, I think. And mm, well, that they say that they believe, but they don't believe, and that there is a disease in their hearts, but there is no verse that says that faith has not entered their hearts explicitly, except for that there's disease and their hearts were sealed. That was about, I think that was a bit of the one that you quoted. I think it was a bit of a more specific context, but it applies very well to what you're saying about political advantage here.
And on the contrary of like getting any favor, which obviously they would not do this if they did not think they were being smart, or if they did not think there was some advantage. Then if they're conscious about it, they would just outright deny. But they're doing it thinking they're going to get something out of it, either with God or with the believers, or both, in some diluted way that they would conceptualize this. But then God kind of gives them a diagnosis, if you will. In their hearts is sickness, so God increased them in sickness. So on the contrary of them gaining something out of this, God increases them in their disease, in their sickness. So it's implying that their sort of transaction that they think they're being smart with it is actually they're harming themselves even by that. Yeah, and on the contrary of them also getting like advantage by lying and portraying themselves falsely per se, they get a punishment, a painful punishment for lying, it says. So you could almost say like it would be better for them just to be honest with themselves and not try to falsely portray themselves.
Wait, but isn't it the same for them whether you warn them or not? What's
Say
going to be
again?
better? Isn't it the same for them whether you warn them or not? What's going to be better for them?
So you're saying it's the same whether you warn them or do not. Therefore, it's equivalent whether they outright deny or are hypocrites. Am I understanding correct?
Okay, so if you say that it'd be better for them not to do it and more logical not to do it, but it's the same whether you say that or you don't say that, whether you keep warning them in regard to God, fear of God, and, well, including hypocrisy as well, rejection and hypocrisy. But it basically is the same for them, whatever you say.
Yes, I would agree in practice 100%, because to them, despite that you would say this, they still think they're being smart. They still think that they are being political. So there's no way to really warn them as well.
This, and coupled with misguidance, also the fact that some of them genuinely think that they believe, but still they are misguided.
And also, I find very strongly, although it does not in any way explicitly say or connect this to the children of Israel, but the children of Israel is the large section that's coming up. So this serves as basically a preview for that. And I highly find that it applies to them as well in a general case, with exceptions, of course, but they say they believe in God and the last day, and they're not believers. And even in the prophet's context, they purport to have believed in him. When they meet those who believed, they say we believed. And when they go back, some of them to others, they're basically saying the opposite.
How about the following two verses where they consider themselves to be righteous or reformers, but they cannot perceive, they genuinely don't understand that they are misguided?
Yes, that's a good point. I'll just read that officially. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ أَلَّا إِنَّهُمْ هُمَ الْمُفْسِدُونَ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. And when it is said to them, do not corrupt in the earth, they said, we are only writers, like correctors. Nay, indeed, they are the corrupters, however, they do not perceive. So this is actually a consistency. Of course, they judge things very wrong, and thus God is pointing out the big disconnect between how they see themselves and how their actions are actually resulting in the world, or how they portray themselves. For me, a great example is like, you can point out how, for instance, in the context of the sort of recent genocide and what have you, if you ask the Israeli side, they would say that they are completely correct, and they would actually pretty much believe it, weirdly. They think that it's justified what they're doing, and they're the victims, despite that they're clearly the aggressors. And they think they're doing what's correct, and that they're in the middle of a hostile region, blah, 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 and they're surrounded by people who would like to erase them from existence. So in their indoctrination and in their very selfishly constructed worldview, they think that they are doing what's correct, weirdly. But that's just evidence that they're completely misguided, because the results are obviously opposite to that.
I also think that verse 11 is it was said to them, "Do not cause corruption in the land." I take the land part to be uh just like general, like as in like any land they come upon, they have an idea about that land, how to rule it or whatever it is. But it's actually corruption, and then they think, no, we're doing the right thing, kind of thing. So in that similar way to what you were saying. Like I'm pretty sure like even there are even yeah, like with some of the Zionists that we know of, like they do say things like that this is the way it has to go. You have to unalive all of these people because of this and that, and then it's like righteous.
Right. Also, we can give an example from the Quran of a similar sort of logic when Musa's coming to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's clearly the corrupter with no debate based on what he's doing to the children of Israel, slaughtering their sons, etc. And yet Pharaoh says, "Let me kill Musa and have him call upon his Lord. Indeed, I fear that he will change your religion or that he will cause corruption in the land." So to him, Musa is the source of corruption, which is going to like change the state of the land, because to him, all this power that they've built up is a product of his like genius and might, and it's been built up, and Musa might ruin all of that from his perspective. So to him, this would be corruption.
Something is up here with the idea of either trying to outsmart God or claiming that you know God's mind or what God really wants, or that your interpretation is the one correct, that you are the one being rightly guided, and that even Pharaoh's claim that likened the threat to his established order to corruption, but it's the order that he established. It doesn't necessitate it being a natural order. So when we're talking about corruption in the land, here in this context, it's something that goes against the natural laws of God, against the way that God created the universe and everything. It's not necessarily the order, like, it's not again against a man-made order, it's against God's order. Do you see what I'm saying? So corruption against like an order that has been established or man-made is basically a threat to your existence. But corruption or attempting to corrupt whatever God has created is no threat for God.
MashaAllah, that's a good summary, actually.
I think this begs me to think that like this section is actually like not about people who say they believe in the Quran but don't, because of verse 13. Like those who believe in Allah on the last day, at least we know the Jews are the Jews, the Christians, Muslims. But then in verse 13 it says, and whereupon it said to them, believe as believe the people. If we're assuming that the people here is the followers of Muhammad, they said, shall we believe as believe the fools? So it makes me think that this isn't like people claiming to follow Muhammad. It's like the Jews or the Christians who say we believe in God in the last day.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point, I think, but Let me read that officially as well. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسُ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ أَلَا إِنَّهُمْ هُمُ السُّفَهَاءُ وَلَكِنْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَا وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ قَالُوا إِنَّ مَعَكُمْ إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون. I guess we'll go there. And whereupon it is said to them, believe as the people believed, they said, shall we believe as the fools believed? Nay, indeed, they are the fools, however, they do not know. And whereupon they met those who believed, they said, we believed. And whereupon they vacated to their devils, they said, indeed, we are with you, we are only mockers. God mocks them in their and extends them in their transgression, they wander blindly. So just like you said, you can apply it primarily to the original context of Revelation, which would be kind of the Medinan scenario, where there's the Jews, for example, Jewish communities who purport to have believed in the Prophet and what was sent down to him, and also extendable to those who were not Jews, just like general associators, if you will, who also purport to have believed. Then when they're told, like, believe how these people have believed, they say, shall we believe as the fools believed? They claim to have believed, but they have a strong aversion to actually believe in the Prophet, for example, or to actually be amongst the guided community. They just want to identify themselves as believers. But when you identify the true believers in any context, you can take it out of the original context. When you identify the true believers, of all people, they identify them as the fools. And that for me is another evidence of the misguidance that God is pointing out, the lack of guidance, the astrayness. Whereas they claim they believe, but when you actually show the believers to them, they would say that those are fools. So they have an incongruence with the actual believers, despite identifying themselves as believers.
There's a disproportionate number of that in sectarianism.
Meaning, like in sectarianism, they tend to
Well, I'm talking about a smaller sect, not like, well, sects that would have deviated from the core message. So those who, you see, there is a fine line between following the believers, not following the majority because it's a majority, but submitting to God, believing in God. Just because it's a majority, they're gonna bring you down to hell, rolling along with them. The majority obviously goes to hell, but their refusal to associate themselves with with the believing majority is something that stands out here. So they would rather either um, try to somewhat be with them outwardly, mix in with them, or else straight away separate and claim them to be wrong, misguided, foolish, or whatsoever. That's also about the ego coming through. That ego comes through more so. There's that last word in verse 10, for what they were lying. That ego comes through as means of protection, of, against their lies being discovered and opened up. Wait, you're muted, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't saying anything again, but
I think by the way, like verse 14 is like maybe the first time like shayateen is used in chapter 2, and it's like referring to the human shayateen.
yeah, could be human and jinn. It does not necessitate, maybe. But yeah, human is kind of the more contextual, because later there's a verse that says, it's now in the section of the children of Israel kind of portion. And it says, when they met those who believed, they said, we believed. And when they turned back some of them to others, they say, do you inform them of what God has kind of revealed to you, so that they would argue with concerning it with your Lord? So they're questioning each other, like, are you basically leaking the information to the prophet and such? So they reveal that they don't believe when they're with each other, but like the similarity of the expression is very noteworthy, because it's almost the exact same expression up to here. When they met those who believed, they said, we believed. And when they depart, they contradict it. So in this case, when they depart to their devils. In the next case, it says, when they depart to each other. And here's just, you could say, generally addressing the hypocrites. But I would say the children of Israel kind of Jewish community is a strong case study. And later it's explicitly in the portion of the children of Israel or Jewish case study.
But that could also be a private admission. Say, devils, mm, voices in your head, something of that sort.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a fair connection, because it fits the basic idea of what hypocrisy is. They outwardly present themselves as believers. When they met those who believed, they said, we believed. But then when they're inward, within their own community, within their own mind, within whatever context, surrounded by their devils, they show their true orientation and loyalty. And I think when they say like we're only mockers, they basically mean like they mock by their deception. They mock by sort of political maneuvering. And then God says God mocks them and extends them in their transgression, meaning God has outmaneuvered them by like deceiving them into thinking that their maneuver is a successful one. Because like I said earlier, they seek to deceive God, or they deceive God basically, but they only deceive themselves. Any other thoughts up to 15?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to
Alaikum salam.
reflect on some points, starting from 6, please. إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. So this is the first assertion in the Quran. إن الذين كفروا. Allah could have told us any information about anything, but He starts with this. And I have a couple of reflections on why. If a true believer on the way of Abraham, they would ideally be Allahum munib, they would be wanting the good for the others. So first thing, Allah saves people from the heartache about rejection and tells the believers that your attempts will be failing. However, this does not drop the obligation or the mission of transmitting the message. You're still required to warn them, but God is reconciling you and telling you beforehand that those who reject, who cover, they will not believe. And this contradicts what all people believe. Most people believe that if they are presented with signs and good arguments that they will follow along, but that is absolutely false. And when, like years ago, I did not take this verse seriously, I thought, no, people are misled because they do not know, but turns out, no, this is literal. Those who cover, whether you want them or not, they don't believe, and God then says that He intervened. He sealed their hearts and on their hearing and on their sights is a cover. So God intervenes by blocking their senses, and as in later, He says He mocks them and pushes them further and supports them in their turpitude and misguidance. So there is no way around showing somebody the truth that God has sealed their senses. And also back to 8, maybe, please, a little up. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ آمَنَّا. In contrast, the first category is defined إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. They are very well defined. These are the people who tell you, I don't want to hear about this. I'm just going to go watch my football match or whatever. Or they tell you this is... They just don't want to hear you. But there are other category of people, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. They are not well defined, and we are not supposed to seek what's in their hearts. But also God's just telling you that they exist. They say they believe, but they don't. They think they are tricking God and the believers, but they're tricking themselves. And so, yes, this is very, very general. Anybody who says they believe in God and the day hereafter, whatever religion they are from, these verses apply to them, and they are often corrupters and they do not know. And about as-sufaha, it is a general rule that those who follow the prophets tend to be of the lower classes of people. And so whenever there are those who are in Tughyan, they tend to look at themselves as higher society, so they would not take part in the same things that the lower classes people do, like bowing down, kneeling, prostrating, like sacrificing inhar, or maybe they look down on such things. So I think this is referred to that. And lastly, I wanted to say that Allah yastahzi bihim wa yamudduhum fi tughyanihim ya'mahun. So not only God reconciles the believers and saves them from heartache, but he also tells them that he is mocking them. So those who realize truth actually end up finding these misguided people very funny. And so this is where I see the humor of Brother Muhammad coming from, and it well suited because there is mockery, like God is mocking them, and so we have a right to laugh at them as we realize the jokes and how blind, wandering they are. And as I told you, Brother Musa, I have a lot to comment about about Alif Lam Mim, but to me, meme is literally meme. And as God is Lord of all words, He also is the Lord of meme lords, and so He makes the best memes. And the following verse, He starts with these examples, memes like examples, and I like stereotypes of people. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. So we have a little time maybe to go a bit further. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا فلما أضاءت ما حوله ذهب الله بنورهم وتركهم في ظلمات لا يبصرون صم بكم عمي فهم لا يرجعون. God mocked, actually we read that. So those are the ones who bought or sold basically the astrayness for guidance, so not profited their trade and not were they guided. Their likeness is as the likeness of one who ignited a fire. So when it illuminated what was around him, God went away with their light and left them in darknesses so that they do not see. Deaf, dumb, blind, so they do not return. So I'll give it a second to reflect. So here God mentions that they bought astrayness basically for the price of guidance. They gave up guidance in exchange for astrayness, and he says their transaction did not profit them, and they were not guided therefore. And we have in this surah 2 more verses like this coming on the section with Bani Israel. But in this case, like how we've been talking about the concept of guidance in this surah and its central importance, and how with the hypocrites, as with the deniers, God is showing the signs of how misguided they are, how not upon guidance they are, thinking they can deceive God by occupying a false position as if God does not know what's in their hearts, thinking that they can take an advantage over the believers, thinking that they can, what else is mentioned? I mean, thinking they're doing good while they're corrupting, like not even being able to identify themselves correctly, if you will, identifying as believers even personally while not being so. And then again, sort of as a diagnosis, God says that it's because, in a sense, that they have traded their guidance for astrayness, because they had access to guidance. So due to the truth coming to them and them not necessarily outright rejecting it, as Brother Omar was just saying, they didn't necessarily outright reject it, this party, but they rejected it in practice. I mean, they did not actually end up believing, and their actions certainly prove that they're not believers. Therefore, they basically traded the guidance for astrayness. And since they gave up guidance in exchange for astrayness, they did not get guided because they gave that up, and they did not even profit in any way, because when you lose guidance and all you're left with is astrayness, well, then you're lost. So you have no way to profit off of astrayness. Astrayness is not profitable. Then God likens them to the likeness of one who ignited a fire, and when it illuminated what was around him, God took away their light, basically, and left them in darknesses, so they do not see. Now, for this example, I find it's very helpful to consider, like, it's a context of original revelation where there's no electricity, and if you're in the wilderness and you are igniting a fire, it's extremely difficult work. You don't just light a match and you have a fire right away. You have to build the kindling, create some friction, whatever, until you make a spark, right? And when the spark starts to catch on the brush or whatever, then the fire starts to expand a bit. And then you do all that work to start the fire, and now when the fire is started, you can see, of course it creates light, and then just one wind can come and extinguish it, and you're left in the dark without the light. And then you also now have to, if you're going to rebuild the fire, for instance, you have to now build the fire in the dark, which is an extremely difficult proposition. You have no phone light to help you or anything like that. And if we're talking about before lighting, like before city lights, then it's pitch black, if you've ever experienced that. It's not just like kind of dark. But anyway, connecting to the hypocrites, it's like they have a moment of clarity. They have a moment of light where they accept faith, you could say, or they, the guidance comes to them and they didn't outright reject. But due to then occupying hypocrisy and rejecting in practice, God takes away the light. Just how they trade their guidance for astrayness.
Think of it from this perspective. When they associate themselves with God, God's authority, believers, when they claim they are believers, they associate themselves with God and His powers. So even if that's a brief moment of understanding or acknowledging that associating oneself with God is profitable or can benefit you. or that God actually has power and authority, so that you would want to associate yourself with Him. You would want to side with God because power is to God alone, might is to God alone. But you have that brief moment, but then since you misuse it by intention, nothing good comes out of it. You just get in that darkness.
Yes, and this one is like, subhanAllah, good summary. And this one is much worse for me than never having the light at all. Because this one is like you just, it's not easy to kindle a fire, like I said. Secondly, you had a moment where you saw, where you had the light, and now you lost it. So now it feels terrible, or it should. If you had just been in the dark the whole time, maybe that's a bit like more, less distressing, but it's still the same effect at the end of the day. But this one is this is a very depressing feeling to have had the light for a second and now to be stuck in the dark.
I don't think that they can see anything, since they, first of all, are not seeing, not perceiving earlier, and then verse 17, not seeing, and 18, deaf, dumb, and blind. They are unable to understand what happened. Maybe bad luck or something, or
And then for deaf, dumb, and blind, it's also, I know we're pretty much out of time, but deaf, dumb, and blind. So deaf obviously can't hear. Dumb, it means basically mute, cannot speak. It's not like what nowadays we call dumb. And then blind is cannot see, obviously. So the person can neither hear nor see nor express themselves nor speak. So if you consider this example of a person who has all three of these, what's the word? All three of these impairments, they're completely unable to be like completely lost by definition. If you were to want to take this person somewhere, you would have to lead them everywhere they go. They're not capable of doing so themselves. Even just one of these is an extreme impediment. Like if you can't see, you usually could not walk anywhere unless you really become experienced. You would need to be led everywhere. If you cannot hear, you really don't know what's going on around you. You don't know what people are saying whatsoever. If you ask for directions, you can't hear the answer. If you're dumb, you're unable to express yourself, means you cannot speak. But if you combine these, it becomes like completely debilitating. The person's completely lost by definition due to lacking these senses. Therefore, now you can imagine taking such a person and placing them somewhere and then expecting them to return. It's an impossible proposition. If they're deaf, dumb, and blind, they cannot return. The person is lost. They cannot come back to you.
is another proof that God only guides, or God is the one who guides. They are unable to perceive their situation, and even if you try offering them help, they are unable to receive it.
Exactly. And that's what denial does. Denial makes it so that you cannot be guided. It's the same, just like it's the same whether you warn them or you do not warn them. They do not believe. You cannot be warned. nothing will avail you whilst you are in the state of denial or hypocrisy, which is also a form of denial, unless you reverse your position. You have to literally give up your denial before you now again are accessible to guidance. Any final thoughts before we close?
Yeah, just I'd like to point out a beautiful use of like the transition between the singular and the plural in verse 17. It's very beautiful. Their likeness is as the likeness of the one who ignited the fire, so when it illuminated what was around him, went God away with their light and left them in darkness that they see. So very briefly, their example is given to the example of one, and then very suddenly is returned to them. So that's one use of a meme where a group of people is represented briefly by one, and then you get the image of their situation just from this example or meme.
MashaAllah, nice point. Okay, I do have to go now, unfortunately, but alhamdulillah for the discussion. And next time we'll pick it up where we left off, God willing. This will be after tomorrow at the same time as today, inshallah. So peace to everyone. Thank you for joining. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Till next time, inshallah.